The seventh continent of planet Earth is wrapped around the South Pole and was one of the last pieces of land for humans to set foot on. The actual last frontier, in the form of the vast continent of Antarctica, doesn't often make it onto the spotlight, so in this video we'll cover everything you should know about Antarctica. Starting off, we will look at some fascinating geography facts and truly mind-boggling phenomena, which can only be found in Antarctica. Next, we'll move on to the history of how humans have discovered the seventh continent, followed by an overview of how scientists from all around the world use the unique conditions on the Antarctic continent to learn more about our planet and the rest of our universe. Finally, the current political situation of this mostly uninhabited continent will be cleared up with an outlook into what the future may behold. Chapter 1. Antarctica's Geography. Antarctica is the fifth largest continent on Earth, clocking in between Europe and South America. The landmass is almost entirely covered by an up to 4,700 meter thick ice sheet, which gradually increases in thickness as you move inland, and it's home to the geographic South Pole, which lays on a plateau above 2,800 meters of ice. The average thickness of the ice sheet over the whole continent is 1.6 kilometers, and its weight has in many places pressed down the bedrock to levels below the sea level, resulting in the landmass looking more like an archipelago once you look under the ice. The continent is surrounded by the Southern Ocean, which, after a vote in the International Hydrographic Organization in 2002, is officially defined by the 60th degree latitude south, avoiding all land interruptions at this level. The Southern Ocean is further subdivided into 12 seas, many of them named after famous polar explorers of the 19th and 20th century, such as James Clark Ross and James Weddell. The bays, named after these British sailors and explorers, are separating the landmass into East and West Antarctica, with the Transantarctic mountain range spanning between them. East Antarctica, the larger of the two landmasses, is roughly the size of the United States, and characterized by extremely windy, cold and dry weather. The majority of the ice cap here receives less than 100 millimeters of precipitation per year. As a reminder, any area with an annual precipitation of less than 250 millimeters, which is just under 10 inches, is considered a desert, meaning that the connected ice sheet crossing East and West Antarctica creates the single largest desert on Earth. These 13.8 million square kilometers of Antarctica are 50% larger than the Sahara Desert and over 5 times the size of the Great Australian Desert, which covers most of Australia's interior. The absence of precipitation can be drawn back to the simple fact that cold air can barely hold any moisture. The on average negative 60 degrees Celsius air in the interior of the continent can hold less than 1% of the water vapor of air at room temperature, resulting in most of the moisture having been rained out on the way to Antarctica. Another extreme weather feature which is unique to the polar ice caps are the extreme wind conditions. Usually, solar radiation heats up Earth's surface, which then dissipates into the lower air layers through convection, leading to thermal buoyancy, creating a gentle temperature gradient, with decreasing temperatures as you move up the atmosphere. In Antarctica, however, these layers are reversed, since the thick ice sheet permanently keeps the lower air layers at temperatures around negative 60 degrees. With reversed buoyancy forces and the force of gravity continuously pushing down kilometer-thick air layers, these eventually pick up speed as they slide down the smooth slopes of the ice cap. While the up to 4.7 kilometer thick ice sheet generally slopes down quite gradually to the coastal areas, there are many gorges and valleys along its topography, which channel these air masses and drastically increase their speed. As a result of this, wind speeds of over 160 kilometers an hour are very common, often reaching into the 200s, and the highest wind speed ever recorded reached a staggering 320 kilometers per hour in the McMurdo Dry Valleys in the Ross Dependency in East Antarctica. These extreme wind speeds in the McMurdo Valleys cause high friction on the land surface, creating heat and resulting in one of the very few places in Antarctica with exposed bedrock. It is believed that these forces have prevented any kind of precipitation in the region for nearly 2 million years now. With places like the McMurdo Dry Valleys being the exception, 98% of Antarctica is covered in ice, hiding most of the topographical features underneath it. Combining airborne radar, satellite imagery, as well as seismic and snow accumulation data, the topography underneath the ice can be made visible, however, revealing many mountain ranges, lakes and rivers. Airborne radio echo sounding has identified a total of 379 lakes as of 2020, with the largest one being Lake Vostok under the Russian-operated Vostok Station in East Antarctica. With a length of 240 kilometers, a width of 50 kilometers, and several hundred meters in depth, it is actually the 6th largest lake in the world measured by volume and the 16th largest by surface area. The hundreds of lakes under the ice sheet are largely connected by rivers which feed and drain them, and the subglacial water acts as a lubricant which accelerates the glacier ice flows over the continent. Understanding these movements of the ice is crucial for understanding and predicting the future of the sensitive polar region. Increased water accumulation increases the lubrication effect, increasing glacier flow, which in return increases subglacial melting caused by friction and again increases the flow speed. This feedback loop is one of the biggest threats to the stability of the ice sheet, and rapid melting would have disastrous effects for the rest of the planet. The Antarctic ice sheet holds 90% of the world's ice, and if all of this water were to be returned to the oceans, global sea levels would rise 61 meters or 200 feet, drowning 25% of the world's settlement. Scientific advancements and new technologies continuously improve our understanding of what is actually happening on this inhospitable continent. In the scale of human history, though, for the longest time, we weren't even aware of its existence, bringing us to Chapter 2, the history of Antarctica. Early hypotheses. The existence of a continent covering the South Pole has been on the agenda of scholars all the way back till ancient times. The Roman-Egyptian geographer Ptolemy and the Greek philosopher and polymath Aristotle have speculated about a landmass in the southern hemisphere, with the idea that it has to balance out the weight of the land in the northern hemisphere. While the reasoning has been found to be flawed today, the hypothesis of a landmass to the south turned out pretty correct. Ptolemy's maps with a Terra Australis, meaning the land of the south, on it, survived until the Renaissance, where cartographers picked these theories back up and created many obscure interpretations. Some connected Africa through the South Pole to the Malaysian Peninsula, while others connected the South American continent to the island of Guinea or New Holland, which today is known as Australia. Despite the fact that no human has ever been close to the Antarctic continent at this point in history, meaning that its existence was purely hypothetical, the Spanish government laid claim on half the continent through the treaties of Tordesillas and Zaragoza in 1494 and 1529 respectively. During the Age of Discovery, humanity slowly figured out that the Southern Ocean is a continuous waterway, separating any potential Terra Australis from Tierra del Fuego, Cape of Good Hope and Australia, but the site of Antarctic land has been denied to these early explorers. The first sightings. The late 17th century saw the discovery of the South Georgia Islands, the first land south of the Antarctic convergence, but it took another 100 years for the first human to cross the Antarctic Circle. James Cook, the captain of the Resolution, was the first to purposefully and knowingly cross the 67th degree latitude, which he did a total of 3 times on his second major voyage circumnavigating the globe, but each time he was forced to retreat by the floating ice masses. After Cook's voyage, it took another 47 years until actual land was sighted south of the 60th parallel. The Russian cartographer and explorer Fabian Gottlieb von Bellinghausen is accredited with this feat after sighting the now called Fimbul ice shelf on the Princess Martha coast. A year later, the American seal hunter John Davis was the first to set foot on the continent, after landing at Hudges Bay in the search of seals. The day of the landing has been documented on the ship's logbook, but many historians are critical about the authenticity of the story. The first undisputed landing in Antarctica is accredited to another American whaler and seal hunter, Mercator Cooper, who went ashore the Otis coast of Victoria Land. A few years before that, the British explorer James Clark Ross tried landing near today's Ross Sea, but failed due to the drift ice. After his return, he claimed that there were no scientific discoveries or problems worth exploring in the far south, which led to a halt of further explorations for the following half-century. The Heroic Age. In the late 19th century, the geographical societies of Europe experienced a resurgence of interest for the Antarctic continent, with John Murray lecturing about the past Antarctic explorations. Up until this point, nobody has yet penetrated any significant distance into the mainland, and the geographic and magnetic South Pole have yet to be visited by humans. The Royal Geographic Society in London encouraged other societies to participate in further explorations of the Antarctic, and the Belgians were the first to act, with Adrien de Gerlache leading the first expedition to have overwintered in the Antarctic in 1897. This expedition, in which the Norwegian Roald Amundsen also participated, for many historians was the start of the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, in which 10 nations sent a total of 17 explorations across 25 years into the most inhospitable continent of the planet. Many pursued finding the South Pole, but others also focused on mapping the coast and major topographical features of the continent. The discoveries of this age kept the scientific community busy for decades to come, and ultimately led to the foundation of our modern understanding of the continent. Roald Amundsen. During the heroic age, the party of Norwegian Roald Amundsen was the first to reach the geographic South Pole in December 1911. Amundsen arrived on the shores of Antarctica almost 1 year before his South Pole push, using this time to set up a base camp and supply depots with seal meat in regular intervals along the designated route. Since Amundsen knew that other teams are attempting the same feat during the same Antarctic summer, he started his push exceptionally early in spring, almost ending in a lethal disaster for parts of his crew. This, however, didn't deter Amundsen from chasing his goal, resulting in another attempt a few weeks later in the season. After 2 months on the ice, making use of the depot stations built in the previous autumn, and slaughtering many of the sledge dogs for food, the party was the first to reach the South Pole on December 14, 1911. Roald Amundsen is rightly praised for his achievement, but there has also been a lot of criticism surrounding the multi-year expedition. Having grown up in Norway, for the longest time it was his dream to be the first person to visit the North Pole. While getting ready for his Arctic expedition, the news broke that Robert Peary and Frederick Cook achieved this feat, leading to Amundsen quickly changing plans to aim for the South Pole instead. This change of plans, however, has been kept a secret from his financial backers and even his own crew until a turnaround wasn't possible anymore. According to the British cultural historian Stephanie Bachevsky, Amundsen and his men reached the pole due to a combination of superb planning, long experience with sledge dogs and skis, and impressive physical stamina. A practical and experienced professional, Amundsen planned carefully and applied all the lessons he has learned in the Arctic. He relied exclusively on the well-tried means of transportation and unsentimentally exploited their food potential. He was similarly efficient and unsentimental in the management of his men. One of the main differences to his peers with the same goal was the fact that Amundsen's only goal was to reach the South Pole, whereas peers like Robert Falcon Scott had distractions such as geographical exploration and the advancement of scientific knowledge during the expedition. The end of the heroic age. The polar explorations of the heroic age have cost the lives of many explorers and ended with Ernst Shackleton's death during the end of his Quest expedition on January 5, 1922. Advancements in transportation and communication technology started the mechanical age of Antarctic exploration, which during and right after the Second World War saw the setting up of the first permanent bases on the continent. Especially the British, Americans and Argentinians set up many bases on the islands surrounding the West Antarctic Peninsula, setting the foundation for modern scientific research from the Antarctic continent. Many of these bases are still active today, bringing advancements in astronomy, glaciology, understanding of the local fauna, and many other fields of science, which brings us to Chapter 3, Science in Antarctica. In 1959, 12 nations which have been active in Antarctica came together to lay the foundation for peaceful and scientific work on the continent. Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Chile, France, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, South Africa, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States have agreed on 13 articles in the Antarctic Treaty, covering topics such as the prohibition of nuclear waste deposits, the prohibition of any action of military nature, the guarantee of freedom for scientific investigation, as well as rules for territorial sovereignty, which we'll get into in the next chapter. By now, another 43 nations have joined the agreement, and a total of 29 countries have a consultative status, meaning that they have earned voting rights for amendments to the treaty, since they have demonstrated strong interest in Antarctica by substantially contributing to research and infrastructure on the continent. Article 3 of this treaty specifically states that contracting parties, meaning the nations which have signed the treaty, shall exchange their plans for a scientific program, as well as resources, and make freely available all scientific observations which result from the work in Antarctica. And scientific observations there are many. The areas which are investigated in Antarctica can be grouped into 3 broad categories, including geographical sciences, which use the Antarctic topography and the physical features to look deep into the history of our planet. Life sciences, which studies the habits and habitats of Antarctic animals such as krill, penguins, seals and whales. And finally, physical sciences, which among many other fields looks into the physics of our universe, the weather and climate change. The dry and unpolluted atmosphere over the ice sheet, together with the long polar winter night, makes the Antarctic the perfect location for astronomical observations. At the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station, run by the US, the South Pole Telescope is observing the cosmic microwave background radiation to learn about the split second after the Big Bang, and it contributed to the Event Horizon Telescope, which together with many other telescopes all around the world, took the first picture of the event horizon of a black hole in a neighboring galaxy. Next to an exceptional view into space, Antarctica also provides an exceptional view into the past of our planet. The kilometers thick ice sheet has been built up by many layers of compacting snow over many millions of years. Tiny air bubbles are getting trapped during the compaction of the ice, so studying these gives insights into the levels of oxygen, carbon dioxide and other gases many hundreds of thousands of years in the past. The deepest sample which has been taken out of the ice sheet is a 3.2 kilometer or 2 mile long ice core, whose deepest samples contain the atmosphere from 800,000 years ago. While the ice gives useful insights into the history, scientists are also interested in what actually lays below the ice. Where the ice sheet is floating onto the Southern Ocean, autonomous underwater vehicles called ice fins are deployed, which reveal how glaciers look from below. While this gives useful insights into the forces which move glaciers, it is also a trial for testing technologies which might be useful when exploring other planets or moons like Jupiter's moon Europe, which is covered by a thick ice sheet just like Antarctica. Antarctica is also prime real estate to study meteors. The dry polar desert preserves them well, and thanks to advanced satellite geography and ground-penetrating radar, they can be detected remotely. The impact date of some specimens which have been found in Antarctica has been dated back to over 1 million years ago. The meteors are often coming from asteroids, but some have also been identified to be originating from our moon and Mars. These space rocks help us understand what we might encounter on other terrestrial bodies, but according to Stan Love, a former NASA astronaut, Antarctica also helps us in a different way. Many of the challenges that scientists face on any of the 90 polar bases can often be translated into how an early research base on Mars or the Moon may look like. Building up stations like the McMurdo Station on the southern tip of Ross Island taught many lessons about city planning in hostile environments, and the importance of storage facilities which outnumber any other type of building by 3 to 1, and lessons about time management. When everything from the air to the ground itself is trying to kill you, you need to spend a significant amount of time of your day on just staying alive and checking your equipment. Another threat looming over the Antarctic continent is the increased ultraviolet light hitting the surface. The ozone hole, which has been discovered in 1985, has seen significant improvements due to the banning of ozone-depleting chemicals, such as the refrigerant chlorofluorocarbon, through the Montreal Protocol, but the levels of ozone in the stratosphere of Antarctica are still far below pre-industrialization levels. The Montreal Protocol is one of very few policies which have been enacted on a global level, with every single country on Earth ratifying it. This kind of cooperation is very important, especially for fragile and mostly uncontrolled ecosystems like Antarctica, the last truly unexplored and untouched piece of land on planet Earth. While the scientific community has a strong sense of sharing and building on top of each other's work, politicians are not exactly known for that, bringing us to Chapter 4, Politics and the Future of Antarctica. Thanks to the Antarctic Treaty of 1959, the race to claim and colonize the last continent of the planet has come to a halt for the past 60 years, but that doesn't guarantee that the future holds a peaceful path. Thanks to the treaty, the responsibility of governing Antarctica is split between all consultative nations, which as of 2022 constitutes 29 nations that carry out substantial scientific work on the continent. These nations meet once per year to exchange information, but also to discuss possible amendments to the treaty. In the past decades, these involved questions about increased tourism in the area and matters related to climate change. For now, the treaty and the discussions in the annual meetings have been mostly of scientific nature, but it is only a matter of time until more contentious issues will be brought up in the plenum. For many decades, it is clear that there is oil, gas, coal, and other valuable minerals covered under the ice and the seas in front of the continent. With advancements in mining and drilling technologies, receding ice masses, and increased global demand for these resources, there will be a lot more heated debates coming up in the future. While the treaty prevents any nation from additional claims, the countries which have laid claim before signing the Treaty of 1959 are still convinced that the land is theirs. A total of 7 nations have laid claim on different wedges extending south to the South Pole. The first claim was made by France in 1940 with the Adelie Land, when Jules de Mondeville discovered the coast and named the land after his wife. Up until 1933, the UK had the largest claim with this and this wedge. With the independence of Australia and New Zealand, these 2 wedges have been passed on, however. Norway is the only country with 2 disconnected claims, having taken possession of the smallest territory with Peter I Island in 1931, before adding Queen Maud Land, the second largest territory, to their claim. Norway's claims have raised eyebrows in Chile and Argentina, which subsequently claimed the land to the south of the South American continent. The claims of both countries are overlapping each other, while also partially overlapping the remaining United Kingdom claim. Shortly before the Antarctic Treaty was signed, this has been raised to the International Court of Justice without much success. As of right now, the claims of France, Australia, New Zealand, the UK and Norway are recognized only by each other, while Chile and Argentina have agreed on mutual protection of their claims, despite them overlapping each other. In world politics, however, a claim is only genuinely recognized if the majority of the United Nations recognizes it, which is not the case for any of the Antarctic slices. In fact, no other nation outside of the 5 non-overlapping claimants recognizes any claim of the continent, turning the situation into a thorn in every nation's eye. Paying attention to this list, you may have noticed that neither of the superpowers of the post-Second World War world order, namely the US or Russia as the successor of the Soviet Union, have laid a claim. During the height of the Cold War, both countries were of course part of the creation of the Antarctic Treaty, and while prohibiting claims from any other country, they reserved the right to make a claim at a later moment. In recent decades, Peru, Brazil, Uruguay and Ecuador also aimed for claiming territory, mostly in the areas claimed by Chile, Argentina and the UK. As signatories of the treaty, however, they do recognize the prohibition of any activities with the interest of territorial claims. With the Antarctic Treaty still in place, peace and the continued use of Antarctica for scientific purposes only is guarded for now. All of the participating nations respect each other's scientific bases scattered over the continent, but increased political polarization and the effects of climate change can severely worsen this harmony towards the end of the century. It is believed that due to global warming, the climate of some areas of Antarctica will change to how Alaska or northern Scandinavia looks like today, allowing for way easier resource extraction, which may trigger greed to take over in some countries. Fungi and bacteria are already living in some volcanic valleys, which hint at locations where agriculture may be possible as early as the beginning of the 22nd century. Discoveries like these suggest that sooner or later Antarctica will be permanently settled. The question is only whether the Antarctic Treaty suffices for situations like this, and if not, to which extent parties will go to exploit the rich Antarctic grounds. As long as humanity focuses on Antarctica as a World Heritage Site, with the only allowed activity being of scientific nature, there's a chance that the last frontier will remain a continent of peace. If economic or political interests take over, however, it can quickly turn into the next battleground.